the delivery boy who built a $10 billion fashion empire. Welcome to Small Cause Big Effect, the show where we uncover how tiny decisions create massive transformations. Today, we're traveling to a small town in northwestern Spain in the 1960s, where a 13-year-old boy is about to witness something that will change not just his life, but the entire fashion industry. Picture this. It's 1949, post-war Spain. Francisco Franco is in power. The country is isolated from the rest of Europe, and in the tiny railway town of Bustongo, a baby is born who will one day become the second richest person in Europe. But here's the twist. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted it would happen through selling clothes. This is the story of Amancio Ortega, a man so private that most people couldn't pick him out of a lineup, yet so successful that he built a fashion empire worth over $60 billion. A man who went from delivering garments as a teenage shop assistant to revolutionizing how the world thinks about fashion. This isn't just a rags to riches story. This is the story of how one moment of humiliation in a clothing store reportedly led to the creation of Zara, and how a shy Spanish man accidentally invented what we now call fast fashion, fundamentally changing how 3 billion people get dressed every morning. Act 1. The humiliation that sparked an empire. Our story begins with a moment that, as the story goes, would haunt Amancio Ortega for the rest of his life, but in the best possible way. It's 1962, and 13-year-old Amancio is walking through the streets of La Coruña, a port city in northwestern Spain, where his family had moved in search of better opportunities. His mother, Josefa, needed to buy something from a local clothing store. Now, understand the context here. This is post-war Spain. The Ortega family is poor, really poor. Amancio's father works as a railway maintenance worker, making barely enough to feed the family. Josefa works as a cleaner and maid for wealthy families. They're the kind of poor where buying new clothes is a luxury they can't afford. So when Josefa walks into this upscale clothing store with her teenage son, she's not there to browse. She's there because she desperately needs something, probably work clothes, and she's hoping the store owner might extend her credit. What reportedly happens next is burned into Amancio's memory forever. The store owner takes one look at this working-class woman and her son, assesses their worn clothes and humble appearance, and refuses to serve them. Not politely, not with regret. He essentially tells them that people like them don't belong in his store. Now, imagine being 13 years old and watching your mother, the woman who works multiple jobs to keep your family afloat, being humiliated like this. Watching her shoulders slump. As she's told she's not good enough to buy clothes from this store. Most kids would have been angry. Some would have been embarrassed. Amancio Ortega was both. But he was also something else determined. According to those who knew him, standing there in that store, watching his mother's humiliation, he made a silent promise that would echo through decades. Someday, I'm going to make clothes that everyone can afford, and I'm going to make sure no one ever feels like this again. It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? The origin story moment where the hero's motivation is crystallized. Whether every detail is precisely as remembered or not, this experience clearly shaped Ortega's worldview. And that determination would eventually reshape the global fashion industry. But first, our teenage hero had to survive poverty, learn a trade, and figure out how to turn righteous anger into business acumen. Act 2. The education of a future. Mogul. After that reportedly humiliating experience, Amancio Ortega did what poor kids have always done. He went to work. At 13 years old, he dropped out of school and got his first job as a shop assistant at a clothing store called Gala. And here's where the story gets interesting. Because this wasn't just any job. It was like getting a PhD in retail psychology working at Gala. Amancio learned something that most business schools don't teach. How to really watch customers. Not just what they buy, but how they shop, how they touch fabrics, what makes them hesitate, what makes them walk away, what makes them open their wallets. He noticed that customers would often come in looking for something specific, a dress they'd seen in a magazine, a style they'd spotted on the street, but the store either didn't have it, or it cost too much, or it wouldn't arrive for months. He watched potential customers leave empty-handed, frustrated, over and over again. Meanwhile, he was also learning the technical side of the business. How clothes were made, how fabric suppliers worked, how the entire supply chain functioned. But more importantly, he was learning how it didn't work, how slow it was, how expensive it was, how disconnected it was from what customers actually wanted. During this time, Amancio was also working side jobs to help support his family. He delivered garments around La Coruña, shirts, dresses, whatever local manufacturers needed, transported to shops and customers. This delivery work might seem unrelated to fashion innovation, but think about it. Delivery teaches you about speed, efficiency, and customer satisfaction. You learn that people want what they want, when they want it, at a price they can afford. These lessons would prove surprisingly relevant to revolutionizing fashion retail. By his late teens, Amancio had moved on to work at a shirt manufacturer called Mayoral. This is where he learned the production side of clothing, how garments were actually made, how long it took, how much it cost. He was essentially getting a masterclass in every aspect of the fashion business, from customer psychology to manufacturing logistics. But here's what made Amancio different from his co-workers. While they saw this as just a job, he saw it as research. Every day was a chance to understand the industry better, to spot inefficiencies, to imagine how things could be done differently. And slowly, an idea began to form in his mind. What if you could make fashionable clothes quickly and cheaply? What if you could respond to what customers wanted in weeks instead of months? What if you could make fashion democratic, available to everyone, not just the wealthy? It was a radical idea. The fashion industry in the 1960s was built on exclusivity, seasonality, and high margins. Amancio Ortega was imagining the exact opposite. Act 3. The bathrobe that changed everything. In 1963, when Amancio was 27 years old, something happened that would set him on the path to becoming one of the richest people in the world. And according to company law, it started with a bathrobe. Amancio was still working in the clothing industry, but he'd started a small side business making women's lingerie and nightwear in his living room, with his future wife, Rosalia, and his brother and sister-in-law. They called their tiny company Confecciones Joe, basically Joe clothing. The story goes that a local boutique owner approached them with a problem. She had received an order for luxury bathrobes from a customer, but her regular supplier had quoted an astronomical price, far more than most people could afford. The boutique owner asked Amancio if he could make similar bathrobes for less money. Now, most people would have looked at this luxury item and thought, there's no way I can compete with established manufacturers. Amancio looked at it and thought, there's no reason this should cost so much. So he examined the bathrobe carefully. High quality fabric, yes, but not impossibly expensive. Good construction, but nothing revolutionary. The high price seemed to come from the brand name, the slow production process, and the multiple middlemen taking their cut. Amancio proved he could produce high-quality bathrobes at a fraction of the original price. Working with his small team, he figured out how to source fabric directly from mills, cut out unnecessary middlemen, and streamline the production process. They delivered excellent bathrobes at a much more accessible price, and the customer was thrilled. But here's the really important part. This wasn't just about making one product cheaper. This was about proving a concept. Amancio had demonstrated that you could take expensive, exclusive fashion items and make them accessible without sacrificing quality. The secret wasn't in cutting corners. It was in cutting out inefficiencies. Word spread quickly through La Coruña's small business community. Here was a young man who could replicate expensive designs quickly and affordably. Orders started pouring in, asked for, building the machine. By the late 1960s, Amancio's little living room operation had grown into something more serious. But he was still thinking small local orders, regional customers, modest profits. What transformed him from a small-town manufacturer into a global visionary was his growing understanding of retail inefficiencies and customer frustration. Observing the fashion industry around him, Amancio was amazed by how slowly everything moved. Customers wanted variety and freshness, but fashion retailers seemed stuck in old patterns. Even in more advanced markets, it still took months for trends to reach regular stores, and by then, customers had often moved on to wanting something else. This is when the full vision hit him. What if you could compress the entire fashion cycle? What if you could go from design to store shelf in weeks instead of months? What if you could make clothes that captured current trends while they were still trendy, not 6 months later when everyone had moved on? The traditional fashion industry worked like this. Designers created collections a year in advance, manufacturers placed orders months ahead of time, and stores received merchandise long after the initial inspiration had faded. It was a system built for a slower world. Amancio imagined something different. A clothing company that could respond to what people were actually wearing, buying, and wanting right now. What would later be called fast fashion, though he didn't use that term yet. When he began building what he called his machine, an integrated system that could go from idea to finished garment in record time, he brought fabric suppliers, manufacturers, and distributors under one umbrella. He created design teams that could quickly interpret and adapt trends. He built a logistics network that could move products from factories to stores in days, not weeks. Most importantly, he maintained absolute control over every step of the process. While other fashion companies outsourced production to whoever offered the lowest prices, Amancio kept everything in-house or with trusted local partners. This wasn't about saving money. It was about saving time. By 1975, his company was generating serious revenue. But Amancio realized he needed something that didn't exist yet. A retail store designed specifically for this new model of fashion retail. A store that could handle rapid inventory turnover, display constantly changing merchandise, and serve customers who expected to find something new every time they visited. So he decided to open his own store. He was going to call it Zorba, after the movie Zorba the Greek. But when he went to register the name, he discovered it was already taken by a bar down the street. Standing in the registration office, he had to come up with a new name on the spot. Looking at the letters he'd already had made for the store sign, he rearranged them into the shortest, most memorable combination he could think of. Z-a-R-a dot. And that's how one of the world's most recognizable fashion brands got its name, from a bureaucratic mix-up and some quick thinking with alphabet tiles. The Zara revolution. On May 24th, 1975, the first Zara store opened on Calle Juan Flores in La Coruña. It was a small shop, nothing fancy, but it represented something completely new in retail. For the first time, a store was designed from the ground up to sell fashionable clothes quickly and cheaply, using what would later be recognized as the fast fashion model. The concept was revolutionary, but simple. Instead of 2 or 4 collections per year like traditional fashion retailers, Zara would have new merchandise constantly. Instead of copying last season's trends, they would respond to what was happening right now. Instead of charging premium prices for exclusivity, they would charge reasonable prices for accessibility. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Customers had never experienced anything like this before. You could walk into Zara on Monday and find something completely different on Wednesday. The store felt alive, constantly changing, always surprising. But here's what made it truly revolutionary. Zara wasn't just selling clothes. They were selling a new relationship with fashion. For the first time, ordinary people could afford to experiment with style, to buy something trendy without making a major financial commitment, to refresh their wardrobe regularly, instead of buying a few expensive pieces that had to last for years. The success in La Coruña convinced Amancio that the concept could work elsewhere. But expanding Zara wasn't just about opening more stores. It was about scaling a complex system that depended on speed, coordination, and absolute control over the supply chain. Through the late 1970s and early 1980s, Zara expanded across Spain. Each new store was both a retail location and a data collection point, feeding information back to headquarters about what customers wanted, what they were buying, and what they were ignoring. This data drove everything. Design teams used it to create new styles. Manufacturers used it to plan production. Store managers used it to optimize inventory. Amancio was building something that had never existed before, a fashion company that could learn and adapt in real time. If you're thinking this sounds like the foundation of modern retail as we know it, you're absolutely right. And if you want to hear more stories about how single innovations reshape entire industries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're just getting to the most incredible part of this transformation, and you won't want to miss what happens next on Small Cause Big Effect. Zara had conquered Spain, but Amancio Ortega knew that real success meant going international. The question was, would a retail concept born in a small Spanish city work in major global markets? His first test was Portugal in 1988. Similar culture, similar economy, relatively safe expansion. It worked. Then came the real test. New York City. Opening in Manhattan was like a fashion company declaring war on the establishment. New York was the heart of American fashion retail, home to department stores that had dominated for decades. These stores worked on traditional models, seasonal buying, high margins, exclusive relationships with designers. Zara walked in and broke every rule. They offered designer-inspired styles at a fraction of the price, with new merchandise arriving constantly. New Yorkers, accustomed to waiting months for European trends to arrive in American stores, suddenly found those same styles available immediately at Zara. The New York store was a sensation. Fashion editors who had never heard of this Spanish company suddenly found themselves writing about the Zara phenomenon. Customers lined up for new arrivals. Competitors scrambled to understand what they were witnessing. But success in New York created a new challenge. How do you maintain a fast fashion supply chain across an ocean? Traditional fashion companies could afford slow international shipping because their merchandise didn't change frequently. Zara needed to get new designs from Spain to America in days, not weeks. Amancio. His solution was characteristically bold and expensive. He built his own logistics network. Zara leased cargo planes, established distribution centers, and created a supply chain that could move merchandise from Spanish factories to American stores faster than most companies could move it across a single country. This wasn't just about efficiency. It was about maintaining the core promise of the Zara experience. A customer in New York had to feel the same sense of constant novelty and discovery as a customer in La Coruña. The speed and freshness that defined Zara couldn't be compromised by geography. Throughout the 1990s, Zara expanded across Europe and into major markets worldwide. Each expansion taught Amancio more about adapting the concept to different cultures while maintaining its essential character. In conservative markets, they offered more modest styles. In fashion-forward cities, they pushed trends harder. But everywhere, the core promise remained the same: fashionable clothes, affordable prices, constant change. 2000, Zara had become a global phenomenon. But Amancio Ortega remained largely unknown outside Spain. He gave almost no interviews, appeared at no fashion shows, maintained no public profile. While other fashion moguls became celebrities, he focused obsessively on perfecting his system. In 2001, Amancio Ortega made a decision that would transform him from a successful Spanish businessman into one of the richest people in the world. He decided to take his company public. But here's where the story gets really interesting. What went public wasn't just Zara. It was Inditex, a holding company that owned not just Zara, but a collection of brands that Amancio had been quietly developing for years. While everyone was focused on Zara's success, Amancio had been applying the same fast fashion principles to different market segments. Pull Bear for younger customers, Massimo Dutti for upscale casual wear, Bershka for trendy teenagers, Stradivarius for young women. Each brand used the same underlying system: quick response to trends, rapid inventory turnover, affordable prices, but targeted different customers. When Inditex went public on May 23, 2001, it raised over $2.3 billion, one of the largest IPOs in Spanish history. Overnight, Amancio Ortega's net worth jumped to over $6 billion, making him one of the richest people in Europe. But here's what made this IPO unique. While most companies go public to raise money for expansion, Amancio barely needed the money. Zara was already profitable and growing rapidly. The IPO was more about creating a permanent capital structure that could support massive global expansion, and about giving his employees ownership stakes in the company they'd helped build. The market response was extraordinary. Investors who had never heard of fast fashion suddenly understood its potential. Here was a retail concept that could generate higher margins than traditional fashion, turn inventory faster than grocery stores, and expand into new markets more quickly than any retail chain in history. Within 5 years of the IPO, Inditex had become one of the most valuable retail companies in the world. Zara stores were opening in major cities globally at a pace of one per day. The company that started with bathrobes in a Spanish living room was generating billions in annual revenue. And Amancio Ortega, the shy man who rarely gave interviews, had become the richest person in Spain and one of the richest in the world. But unlike many billionaires who become public figures, he remained almost invisible, focused entirely on perfecting his business rather than enjoying celebrity. By 2010, something remarkable had happened. The entire fashion industry had been forced to change because of what one Spanish man had started in his living room. Fast fashion wasn't just a business model anymore. It had become the dominant way that most people around the world bought clothes. Traditional department stores that had operated the same way for decades suddenly found themselves obsolete. Fashion brands that took months to bring new designs to market were losing customers to companies that could do it in weeks. The whole rhythm of retail had accelerated. But Amancio Ortega wasn't done innovating. While competitors were still trying to copy Zara's original model, he was already evolving it. In recent years, Zara has accelerated its online and sustainability initiatives to maintain industry leadership, investing heavily in e-commerce integration, mobile shopping, and sustainable manufacturing practices. The man who had started by making bathrobes was now setting the pace for a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Fashion weeks in Paris, Milan, and New York still happened. But increasingly, what mattered wasn't what designers showed on runways. It was how quickly those trends could be interpreted and delivered to ordinary customers. This transformation wasn't without controversy. Critics argued that fast fashion promoted waste, exploited workers, and damaged the environment. Amancio responded by investing heavily in sustainable manufacturing, improving working conditions, and creating recycling programs. But he never abandoned the core insight that had driven his success. People want fashionable clothes they can afford, and they want them now. By 2015, Inditex had become the world's largest fashion retailer, with over 7,000 stores in 96 countries. Amancio Ortega's personal net worth had grown to over $60 billion, making him briefly the richest person in the world. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this success was how quietly it happened. While tech entrepreneurs became global celebrities and financial moguls wrote best-selling books, Amancio Ortega remained largely unknown outside business circles. He gave almost no interviews, made few public appearances, and seemed more interested in perfecting his supply chain than promoting his personal brand. The transformation from delivery boy to global fashion mogul is almost complete. But before we wrap up this incredible journey, let me ask you something. If this story is changing how you think about opportunity, innovation, or persistence, hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about how ordinary people create extraordinary change, make sure you're subscribed to Small Cause Big Effect, because these transformation stories are exactly what we're all about. Conclusion. In 2011, at the age of 75, Amancio Ortega stepped down as chairman of Inditex, though he remained the company's largest shareholder. The man who had revolutionized global fashion decided it was time to let others run the day-to-day operations of the empire he'd built. But this wasn't a traditional retirement. Amancio had spent decades perfecting a system that could function without depending on any single person, even its creator. The fast fashion model he'd pioneered had become so embedded in the company's DNA that it could continue evolving and expanding without his direct involvement. Today, Amancio Ortega lives quietly in La Coruña, the same city where he reportedly experienced that humiliating moment in the clothing store over 60 years ago. He still goes to the same coffee shop most mornings. He still avoids publicity and rarely gives interviews. But his impact on the world is impossible to ignore. Every time someone walks into a Zara, H&M, Forever 21, or any fast fashion store, they're experiencing the retail revolution that Amancio Ortega started. Every time someone buys an affordable version of a designer trend, they're benefiting from the democratization of fashion that he pioneered. But I think the real lesson of Amancio Ortega's story isn't about fashion or retail or even business success. It's about paying attention to problems that everyone else accepts as normal. In the 1960s, everyone accepted that fashionable clothes were expensive and exclusive. Everyone accepted that it took months for trends to reach ordinary consumers. Everyone accepted that style was a luxury that most people couldn't afford. Amancio Ortega didn't accept any of that. He looked at an industry that seemed permanent and unchangeable, and he asked a simple question: why does it have to work this way? That question, why does it have to work this way, might be the most powerful tool for innovation ever invented. It's the question that led a teenage delivery boy to revolutionize fashion. It's the question that turns ordinary people into extraordinary change makers. The humiliation that 13-year-old Amancio reportedly felt watching his mother being refused service in that clothing store became the fuel for a transformation that affected billions of people. He didn't just get revenge. He made sure that no one would ever have to feel that way again because of the price of clothes. That small cause, one moment of injustice witnessed by a poor Spanish boy, created a massive effect that changed how the entire world thinks about fashion, retail, and accessibility. And maybe that's the most important lesson here. You don't need to be born wealthy or connected or educated to change the world. You just need to pay attention to problems that everyone else ignores. And you need to care enough to do something about them. The next time you walk into any clothing store and find affordable, fashionable options, remember the delivery boy who made that possible. Remember that the biggest changes often start with the smallest observations, and that sometimes the most powerful revolutions are led by the quietest revolutionaries. That's our story for today on Small Cause Big Effect. Before you go, I want to challenge you. What industry or problem in your life do you accept as just the way things are? What would happen if you asked, why does it have to work this way? Maybe your answer will be the next small cause that creates a massive effect. If this story inspired you to think differently about the problems around you, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We explore these incredible transformation stories every week. And trust me, the best ones are still to come. Until next time, remember the future belongs to those who refuse to accept the present as permanent.